Hello, my name is Sam Robinson, and I am the Gnostic Syncretist, and this is the Gnostic Syncretist podcast. Thank you for joining us tonight, and please like, subscribe, and share this around if you feel so inclined. In our last video, and several videos, we have been going over Ancient Gnosticism and their process and spiritual development concept called Gnosis. And even before that, we covered the archons and spiritual parasitical nature of their paradigm, as well as the one they've clearly instigated in our own current world civilizations. But in the most previous video that I just did recently, we were going over and I was delineating the history of ancient Gnosticism from the 1st to the 4th century, its uniqueness in the esoteric spiritual traditions, how it overlapped with Hermeticism and aspects of the Kabbalah and Neoplatonism, specifically in the area of the city of Alexandria. We also covered the various unique spiritual themes that run throughout their literature, from non-duality to also duality, the Demiurge, and association of Yahweh, and their Demiurge being called Yaldabaoth, with the Abrahamic traditions deity Yahweh. The idea of spiritual attainment through direct spiritual knowledge from the higher planes through different techniques and meditative practices, as well as ecstatic trances. We went over several different sects of Gnosticism briefly, and we also covered the Nag Hammadi codices and the nature of their discovery, what had been hitherto unknown prior to that, and what was known prior to that was related to their opponents, as well as a few fragmentary Gnostic texts like the Pistis Sophia, and how the Nag Hammadi absolutely revolutionized people's understanding of Gnosticism almost completely, with the addition of 52 different texts, some fragmentary, some completely intact. And from there, I would like to go into one of the most well-known Gnostic schools or orders or sects of thought, which is the one called Valentinian Gnosticism. And it was a school of Gnostic spiritual thought, and one of the major sects of Gnosticism in general that came out of this period after the 1st century AD. It was founded by a man named Valentinus in the 2nd century AD, and it became widely influential and extremely widely disseminated throughout the Roman Empire and the regions surrounding it, like Northwest Africa, Egypt, Syria, Asia Minor, and a few other places. Unfortunately, they later, in their history, they also splintered eventually into an Eastern and Western school of thought, and it even remained active up through the 4th century AD, after the Roman Empire became Christianized and was subsequently wiped out. I think it ends there for the Valentinians. But before all that, there was Valentinus, and he was approximately born 100 AD and approximately died 180 AD, is what we learn. And he was born in Alexandria. And according to one Christian scholar, Epiphanius of Salamis, Valentinus was born in Egypt and educated in Alexandria, which makes sense. And according to another Christian theologian, Clement of Alexandria, who some may know of, he was taught by Theudas and was a disciple of the Apostle Paul, allegedly. That's unable to be completely verified, obviously. But Valentinus was considered an exceptional man, even for the time. He was a man who had a reputation for being exceedingly eloquent and exhibiting an enormous amount of charisma and a type of, esoteric magnetism, which attracted many, many people to his new types of ideas related to Gnosticism. He's maybe the first Gnostic individual that hits us in the historical record, who created a movement around himself. And he supposedly went to Rome between AD 136 and 140, and during the reign of Pope Hyginus, he rose to his greatest level of prominence in his teachings between 150 and 155, during the time of Pope Pius in that era. He was further described as an extremely and highly skilled and successful teacher of concepts and doctrines and philosophy. And for a time in the mid-2nd century AD, he was reportedly even a well-respected and prominent figure even within the Catholic community itself. In Rome, he even was supposedly and allegedly sought a bishopship. And even though it's been insinuated, though it's unverified, that he was passed over in this office for his bishopship, he decided to break with the Catholic Church and found his own school of thought called Valentinian Gnosticism, or at least that's what we call it. He was a very, very prolific writer, and unfortunately, of course, like most of this stuff, his works are not with us today, unfortunately, with many of the surviving remains simply being quotations from various authors by like Clement of Alexandria, Hippolytus, Marsilius of Ancyra, and who were obviously adversarial to the Gnostic teachings. Like I said in several of my previous videos, before the Nag Hammadi writings were found in 1945, the majority of our information regarding people like Valentinus and Valentinian Gnosticism and the tradition in general really came a large part, actually not even more than a large part, almost entirely from their opponents and adversaries to their spiritual concepts. And they remained that way until 1945. So some people think that the gospel truth of the Nag Hammadi can be attributed to the Valentinians or even Valentinus himself. We're not entirely sure. Some notable Valentinians, though, of that school of thought are Heracleon, Ptolemy, Florinus, Axionicus, and Theodotus. Well-known church father figure Arrhenius, extremely inimical to the Gnostic concepts and doctrines, and Valentinus personally, and his branch of Gnosticism particularly, decided to provide an extremely detailed theological and cosmological extrapolation of the Valentinian Gnostic school's ideas on cosmology and the universe and the origin of man. And it is inherently complex with difficult aspects to comprehend, but is nonetheless fascinating as well as enlightening, to say the least. So Valentinus founded it, around, I guess you could say 160, potentially. Not exactly sure. But he's a major Gnostic figurehead of a major branch of Gnosticism. So in what ways can I say that his concepts totally differ from the ones at the time? Well, we're going to go into that. And it's very interesting. We'll go into not only one of the more pertinent ones, which is about the Valentinian doctrine of salvation, which is extremely interesting to me and totally different. And then we'll also go into the most prominent aspect of Valentinianism, which is their cosmology, which is extremely fascinating and obviously revolves around the idea of the Demiurge and Sophia and the Aeons and the Archons. So in Valentinian Gnosticism, the conceptualization for getting or attaining Gnostic salvation was sometimes referred to as redemptive reintegration and is hardly unique to this school of thought. So in the Valentinian system, redemptive gnosis is almost like a form of spiritual actuation and doesn't exist singularly or in an individuated operation to the person, but is more like a cosmic endeavor undertaken by the individual to reintegrate, restore, and reestablish harmony in the cosmic order's framework. So this is definitely different than some of the other ones. The cosmic superstructure became chaotically disrupted and thus, therefore, inevitably subject to a form of entropy, from the inception of gross matter and materialization of realms, which was subsequently imprisoned a spark of the divine light essence into what's called the evil Hyle matter, Hyle, their word for matter. And so he largely saw matter, I guess, as evil, which is what some people have accused them of. Thus, in Valentinian's Gnostic school of thought, this doctrine of salvation, the initiation of Gnosis, is an activity, a spiritual activity, for restoring the initial and primordial equilibrium that existed before the instigation of this disruptive event or occurrence, and represents the, so to speak, rectification of the flaw generated inside the pleromic sphere of the Aeons. In so doing. So this is even bigger. This isn't even about individual redemption through Gnosis. This is more like a larger cosmic operation and schematic for how the totality of order could be restored to the cosmic order itself on like a macrocosmic scale. While some of the other schools of Gnostic thought definitely saw it much more as an individual act of spiritual regeneration, as opposed to a large scale, almost collectivist regeneration of the entire cosmic order itself, which is quite a distinction. So, the actuation of Gnosis as a process by which the divine sparks are disentangled and liberated from gross matter or Hyle is the singular and essential aspect of their topic on spirit and their concept of spiritual salvation or regeneration itself. So these divine sparks, like I had said in the previous video, become, so to speak, entangled or ensnared in the evil or polluted aspect of the cosmos called Hyle or gross matter. And the process of Gnosis, or the path of Gnosis, is an activity to disentangle and to, remove and liberate into freedom this divine spark from the Hyle, the gross matter. That is what Gnosis is for the Valentinians, as opposed to being a personal salvation, a personal spiritual regeneration. You're actually aiding in the regeneration of the totality of the cosmic scheme itself. Additionally, according to the Valentinians, once all the divine spark or divine essences are extracted or freed from Hyle in the material realm, the Hylic world will subsequently be destroyed, according to them, and expunged from the celestial blueprint entirely, and thus would result in the inevitable restoration of the necessary and primordial equilibrium that had existed before this event. That's some interesting stuff right there, and different. And on top of that, and another additional aspect of Valentinian's divine myth depicts a supposition in relation to the nature of our essence and the essence of certain spiritual entities said to be birthed from the union of the Savior and of the Aeon Sophia. According to the Valentinians, just as the Savior is portrayed as the bridegroom to the bride Sophia Achamoth, the celestial angels have been depicted as the sons of these two entities. And their nature is the masculine counterpart betrothed to the ensouled Gnostics. This is very just unique to them. And according to the Valentinians, who are feminine souls in essence. Very distinct from other schools of thought. Furthermore, this postulate expresses the notion that every Gnostic had her fallen counterpart that basks in the presence of the primordial Father, with the specific objective of a spiritually pious existence being hinged upon by experiential reintegration or a type of divine internal unification with this cosmic ideal person or personage. Then, in essence, the Gnostic is perpetually meditating upon the secret of the celestial reunion with with their own metaphysical consort, the syzygia. Of course, and to quote, the final consummation of all things will take place when all that is spiritual has been formed and perfected by Gnosis. End quote. Definitely a unique take on spiritual regeneration in this school of thought. Very much so. But so what was this event? What was this, perturbation of the harmonic equilibrium of the cosmic order that he's talking about? But we're going to have to go into the cosmology that they adhere to fully understand this. And we will do this first by going into the creation of humanity as they saw it. Within the Valentinian Gnostic school of thought, the creation of the world is interrelated to the concept of humanity in its place within its framework of the cosmos. Their doctrines specifically delineate this relational concept of a man and describe humanity's manifestation as one which was initiated by angels who were allocated world creation attributes to perform this act of original generation of the human race. So this would largely be, I would think, the Aeons. According to them, these angels, maybe I'm wrong. These angels refer to them as archons in other versions, but piece together. So one thing that you need to understand is there are versions of Gnosticism where our original archetypal essence or cosmic celestial blueprint is from the Pleromic realm of the Aeons, but the body it's ensouled into was made by archons. So there's the vessel, and then there's the essence. The essence is divine. The body was made by the archons, is how they say it. They supposedly piece us together with the material form, which was eventually to become mankind itself. And there was a very sneaky and surreptitious and important event that was instigated without their prior knowledge, causing them extreme concern. These archons who were building the body's form for us. In this cosmology, this occurrence was the infusing of the material body with the seed of spirit by an agency of the higher Pleromic realm, an Aeon, which these archons / angels were unaware of this occurrence. Once imbued with the Pleroma element of spirit, which the archons did not have apparently, the original human manifestation rose up, allegedly, and exhibited an extremely sophisticated degree of speech, intelligence, and an innate capacity for understanding, spiritual understanding, which was far greater than the nature that the archons had for themselves. And obviously, what's the result of that? They were jealous. According to the Valentinians, once these angels realized that the being they had engineered was their superior being, was a superior being than they were terrified and worried, and they tried to supplant, destroy their own creation. And that was us. According to a certain text of the Nag Hammadi, Sethian text, which I'm likely referring to probably the Secret Book of John, these beings out of fear cast humanity into the lowest, most dense, and Hylic realm of the materium, and attempted to put us into a Matrix-style deep sleep, and hide our own higher spiritual potential in a latent form within us, to keep it in a latent form, so to speak. According to another treatise that has supposedly been authored by Valentinus himself, humanity exists in a threefold nature, this is interesting, spiritual, psychical, and material simultaneously. Also, their treatise explains the concept of mankind arising into three types of humans, who then exhibit differing degrees or levels of intelligence and understanding. And they had three terms for this as well: pneumatic, psychic, and the hylic types of human beings. That is specific to this school: the pneumatic, the psychic, and the hylic type of human being, the three types of humans according to Valentinian Gnosticism. Then, so then they go into what that means to them. The pneumatic man is the highest type of human being, represented as existing in a totally holistic spiritual state, who can totally and readily ascend out of the grosser aspects of his material nature and the material realms, and essentially journey back to the Pleroma realms easily. The instigation of this ascension is by extricating himself out of the grasp of the Demiurge with the aid of the Savior in Sophia Achaboth, who help him journey back to the Pleroma, where the human becomes divested of his body and soul, becoming just simply purely spirit in his essence. Then there's the psychic human. Along with the psychic human, who the Demiurge is master, exhibits a greater degree of ability than the base man, but still only finds himself entering into a middling state of post-life existence, which is neither Pleromic nor Hylic, or so to speak, gross matter or hell, as they saw it. The last type of human classified under Valentinian Gnosticism is the Hylic type of human, who exhibits no such advanced psychic or spiritual perceptive abilities whatsoever, and is in a psychological state completely enamored with the demiurgic realm and classes of the other two humans, and loves his gross materiality. He believes this material form is all that he or she shall ever have. Reminds you of people today. This type of human purportedly will remain encased and entranced by gross matter, returning to it upon death, and then being consumed by fire. It's not completely stipulated that they'll be totally condemned to oblivion eternally, but they could be reincarnated after death to a new life cycle that would potentially constitute their remanifestation into the higher spiritual archetype the next time, thus enabling them to exist as the spiritual archetype with a chance for celestial extrication and rebirth out of the demiurgic realm. Totally unique to them. Very interesting to me that that's how they see things. A little bit classist, a little bit like spiritually racist in a certain way, obviously, and especially the rather Kabbalistic like reference to a future Kabbalist from the 15th century who had a very similar concept to the spheres of the Kabbalah, or that divine essence, being broken into like shards, and that the shards had to be put all back together again down in the material plane before salvation could commence for the Jews. And Laurenti, I think it's Laurentian Kabbalah, or I'll have to look it up again. But he was a very famous Kabbalist, made a whole lot of different distinctions in the Kabbalistic philosophical expositions and cosmology relating to the shards, relating to the base of the Sephirotic spheres, and the breaking of them in their essence, kind of fragmenting and going out into into our world and needing to be recovered and reconstituted, similar to this concept right here. So now we will go into more of the specific cosmology. So this is getting interesting, and then in our next video we will continue the Valentinian cosmology before we go into some of the others, because they definitely diverge in many ways, though like I said, some run pretty parallel. So according to Arrhenius, in his Against Heresies, their system of cosmology believed in a primal principle of the universe that existed. They referred to it as the Pleroma, which means fullness. And the center of the Pleroma resided the primordial father, called Bythos, which is the beginning of all things in existence. And after countless ages of total silence and contemplation, this Bythos emanated or projected 30 Aeons deities or divinities that were essentially celestial archetypes, which were differentiated into 15 syzygies, which means, so to speak, sexually gendered complementary pairs of sympathetic polarities, male and females respectively. Each one was either male or female, and they were couplings, which is a syzygy. According to these Valentinians, within these manifested Aeonic deities was the one called Sophia, which is the Aeon of wisdom. And they say due to her alleged weakness, which was her passion and curiosity, so that's a weakness, led her to plunge out of the Pleroma realm, which subsequently resulted in the manifestation of the world and humanity, held to both be flawed after a manner. This is the original sin, not even committed by humanity in this, committed by divine beings. Not the divine, most divine, but this female, the Aeon Sophia. So after this plunge, it was the plunge out of the heavenly realm. She fell into the realm of matter, and this plunge resulted in the Demiurge, Yaldabaoth, which the Valentinians specifically related to the Old Testament God, Jehovah, Yahweh, and said that he was the architect or creator of the material world. They said humanity was the highest being in the material plane or world and participated in both the spiritual and the physical aspects of this reality and of nature. Furthermore, they also believed that the work of redemption consisted of extricating the spiritual aspect of humanity from this material nature of himself. And so to speak, this is where people have claimed that the Gnostics, at least some of them, see matter as evil and rejected it completely, and were absolutely antithetical to the material world in its entirety, and saw it as a demiurgic prison to be escaped from, to be extricated from, and that was their sole existence. That was their sole mission and purpose in life, was to extricate themselves from the demiurgic material plane, which was an abomination to them. So, on top of that, so then they have, and we'll go back into their oh, here we go. One must recognize and realize the primordial Father as constituting the essence or depth of all being, and as the true source of the divine power in the universe. And through this, you could attain Gnosis, divine understanding or divine knowledge about reality. Furthermore, once you acquire Gnosis, the individual human would subsequently manifest positive permeating consequences throughout the universal order, as I said a moment ago, and would contribute to the restoration of this cosmic order in reality. And it would not be faith, but Gnosis that would be the key to not only your own salvation, but the salvation of the cosmic order. So quite a lot to live up to. Clement of Alexandria, specifically rather the Valentinians, regarded the Catholic Christians, quote, as simple people to whom they attributed faith, well, they think only Gnosis is in themselves. That the excellent seed that is to be found in them, they are by nature redeemed, and their Gnosis is as far removed from faith as the spiritual form from the physical, end quote, by Clement of Alexandria, which is a very interesting quote. Of course, it's one of their opponents, so it's hard to know exactly how accurate he's being. So the system of celestial superstructures in the Aeons in Valentinian Gnosticism is extremely complex, and it's a very elaborate system of Aeonic divisions or of a divine hierarchy, and they belong to the purely ideal, noumenal, intelligible, and super sensible world reality, and are considered, so to speak, immaterial or hypostatic ideas. So to speak, as an aggregation um, of divine celestial archetypal ideas, along with the prime originator. They form together what's called the Pleroma, and the transition from the immaterial or spiritual to the material, from the noumenal to the sensible, is manifested through a flaw or passion in the agitation of the Aeon Sophia. So here is a breakdown of the various aeons listed in the Valentinian cosmology. You have the Ogdoad, which is the first four sets of aeons, which is Bythos, which means depth or profundity, Sigi or Anoia, which means silence or idea. You have Nous, which is mind. You have Aletheia, which is truth. You have Logos, which of course means word. You have Zoe, which means life. You have Anthropos, that's man, archetype of man. Ecclesia, which means church. And then next you have the decad of aeons, which is Bithios, means deep. Mixus, which is commingling. Adratos, the unaging or the undying. Henosis, which is union. Autophoes, the self-existent, or how else do some people say it? Autogenes, I think is maybe another way to say that. Nebhedone, where we get the word hedonistic, pleasure or bliss, and Akinitos, the immovable. Then there's also syncrasis, the blending or synthesis, the monogenes, the self-generated, Makaria, which means happiness, and then the next set is the dodecad, which is Parakletos, comforter or helper, Pistis, which means faith, Patrikos, which means paternal, Elpis, which is hope, Metrikos, which means maternal, Agape, love, and Ainos, praise or everlasting, Synesis, which is intelligence, Ecclesiasticos, which means ecclesiastical, Makariotes, which is happiness, Thelatos or Thelete, which is an important aeon, willed or longed for, and then finally the Aeon Sophia, which means wisdom. So, there you have the beginning of our concepts and ideas relating to Valentinian Gnosticism. You have their totally unique idea, which relates to this form of spiritual generation that totally revolves around reharmonizing the entirety of the cosmic order, which apparently fell into disorder due to the plunge of the Aeon Sophia and the creation of the human realm, which resulted in us as well as this disharmony along with the Demiurge. So, on top of that, you have the three types of humans: the pneumatic, the psychic, and the hylic, which is a class-based system, I guess, of a spiritual type that they relegated various types of human beings to in Valentinian Gnosticism, which is totally unique to them that I'm aware of. And then you have, once again, the idea of not individual salvation, but a collective through the individual regeneration and salvation for both you and the entire cosmic scheme, which is very, very, very interesting to me and unique. So that will be followed by the further elaboration of Valentinian cosmology, which it will take at least one more video at best, maybe more. So, the Valentinians are one of the ones that come down to us, and they're so fascinating because of the uniqueness of their ideas, especially for the time period. The Kabbalistic scholar I'm thinking of, whose name escapes me, came up with his idea of fragmentary shards of the breaking spheric vessels, 1,300 years later when he came out with it. And it was a revolution in the Kabbalistic thinking and philosophy and cosmology when he did so. But to think that this was in the early centuries of the first millennium is pretty mind-boggling, these ideas, especially when I haven't found any reference to any other such concepts like sparks of the divine, fragments falling into the matter, becoming part of ourselves and part of our own essence, and then through spiritual teaching and regeneration through a certain process of we, basically send it back out to restore order to the cosmos. It's the total opposite of having a singular individual or avatar descent type individual salvation story. So then that obviously be Jesus or Krishna or whatever. You'd have a singular individual come down and redeem all mankind. And it's not even saving the cosmos, you're just saving mankind. It's the total opposite in this. Instead, the cosmic order has become imbalanced due to divine action. And the only way to restore that order is through human action in the collective, as opposed to through an individual. Only through human collective spiritual action can the cosmic order be regenerated, which is totally the antithetical concept of the previous salvationist paradigm of Christianity. Now, I would say both at this time period are fairly new concepts anyway, but bear that in mind, that it takes the entire Jesus story and applies it to the entirety of humanity itself. And you're not redeeming mankind, you're redeeming the cosmos. It'd be as if you took Jesus and made him humanity itself, and then his sacrifice saved the cosmic order and reharmonized it, and not ourselves. He didn't redeem humanity, he redeemed the deities, the cosmic order that they created and failed at. It's definitely the opposite entirely. So, lastly, I'll just say before we finish this video and on Valentinian cosmology is that there were 30 of them, specifically 30 sets of Aeons. I'm pretty sure the Basilidians, Basilidas, had countless Aeons. There's like almost an unlimited. I think there might have been. It's either them or the Sethians. They had like an almost unlimited number of Aeons. Specifically, like there was no end to the Aeons. Though Sophia still takes prominence. So, sorry, I was interrupted by a phone call of my brothers. To end on the Valentinian cosmology where we are is to state that Sophia is absolutely the hard center of their narrative, as well as being the celestial personification of the divine feminine archetypal principle itself. She is the youngest and last of the Aeons, and the most significant by far. And a few of the other ones, she's not. She still plays a role, but she's not like the linchpin or the keystone or keynote of the entire cosmology itself, like in the Valentinian one. In the Sethian one, which is the Secret Book of John, she's absolutely also the centerpiece of their cosmology. So we will end it there, and we will continue in our next video going over Valentinian Gnostic cosmology. So my name is Sam Robinson. Thank you for joining me tonight, and please like and subscribe, share this around, and we'll be seeing you very soon. And look forward to diving ever deeper into the traditions and antiquity of ancient Gnosticism and their unique spiritual philosophy and origin stories. So we'll see you soon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sam Robinson.